In this lesson, we're going to focus in on how to apply effects and presets to your footage in After Effects. So first, we'll need to gain access to these effects. So how do you do that? Well, if you're using the standard workspace, you'll find your effects on the right here. You can also, if you wish, go up to Effect and gain access to all the effects right up there. If you don't see the effects panel on the right, you can always come over here to your workspace and choose Standard and make sure it's reset, or you can go up to Window and then choose Effects and Presets right here. So once you see the panel, you can go through here and let's just click on some here. If we click on Channel as an example, you can see we have all sorts of different effects inside of that. So the channel is just a category. All these right here are categories. So if you want to do some color correction, you'd go into the color correction category and then choose the appropriate effect that you want to work with. In this lesson, we'll show you how to apply effects, change the settings of effects. In addition to that, we'll explore some popular effects and see how they can be used to enhance footage in After Effects. In this video, I'm going to show you how to apply effects to your footage in After Effects. First, make sure you have the Lesson 4 project file opened up, which is located in your work files. You can use this project file throughout the duration of this lesson. So first, we'll want to locate the Effects and Presets panel, which is located on your right, and we'll want to choose an effect just so we can play around with this. So I'm going to go into the Stylize category, which is right here, and I'm going to locate the cartoon effect, which is right here. Now, in order to apply an effect, you can do one of two things. You can drag it over to the workspace, to your composition, just like this, and you can see it has some lines surrounding the clip, indicating you're about to apply an effect to it, or you can drag your effect down here and apply it to the clip on the timeline. Either way, it will work. So let's just apply it. And once you apply the effect, you can see now on the left, we have an effect controls area that appears. And under cartoon, we can do many different things here pertaining to the effect. As an example, I can come over here to detail radius and I could increase this. You can see as we do this, we're creating more of a pixelized look for the video. And let me just come down here and I will zoom in a bit more just so we can see what's going on. So as you can see, the effect is having that change to the footage. And as I adjust different dials here, you can see we are creating a different effect for this footage. I can scale this back like that. I can bring this in. You can see we definitely have something different going on now with this footage. And if I play this, you can see what it looks like. So we can apply multiple effects to one clip. Let me come back here to my Effects and Presets panel. I'm just going to go up here and I'm going to find Blur and Sharpen, and I will choose the camera lens blur. Now we can also, in addition to dragging the effect onto the workspace composition and the timeline, is take this effect and bring it over here to your Effect Controls panel. You can see I can either put it before or after the current effect. Let's put it after and release. You can see now we have a new list of options to play around with. Now, the thing about this is, when it comes to working with your effects, order does sometimes matter. It will depend on the effects you have in place. But let me just come in here really quick and adjust the blur radius to about right here, so it's pretty blurry. Now, if I come back up here to the cartoon effect, I'm going to close it off and the blur effect as well, just so we can see the two effects and not the properties. Now, if I take the cartoon effect, click and drag and put it below the camera blur and release, you can see we have a different effect occurring because the lens blur goes first and then the cartoon effect. So the cartoon is being overlaid over the blur, as opposed to the blur being overlaid over the effect of the cartoon. So keep this in mind as you add additional effects. The order can matter, and it can greatly alter the way things look. Now, at any time, if you're working with an effect and you want to turn it off just to see what it looks like without the effect, simply come over here to your Effect Controls panel and click the FX button. This will disable that effect, and you can see what's going on. Now, it doesn't delete it. You can just bring it back just like that. It's just hiding the effect from view so you can get a better idea of what's occurring with these effects. You can also reset an effect. So let's say you made some alterations. You can come down here and click the reset button, and it will bring it back to the default parameters of that effect. And there's many different options. Every effect will have different options for it. So if I come over here and click on the camera lens blur, you can see we have iris properties, blur map, highlight, and just a bunch of other things we can work with. If I go to cartoon, you can see we have different options entirely. Again, it just depends on your effects. Finally, if you want to delete an effect, simply click on the effect itself and then hit delete. This will remove the effect entirely from your workflow. The only way to get it back is to go through the Effects and Presets panel or to go to Edit and Undo. And each clip has its own effects. So if I go back to the project, and let's just add a second baby clip to this. I'll just click and drag and release. We now have a second clip on the timeline. I'll go ahead and hide the first one. You can see now that this clip has no effects on it. If I click on it and go to the Effect Controls, we have nothing listed. Go back here, we have a bunch of effects. So each clip has its own effects. Finally, you can access your effects on the timeline as well. You can see we have a drop-down arrow here. Let me just delete this one really quick. This drop-down arrow, when we click that, will bring up the effects. And you can see we have the cartoon and blur effects right here. We can click on each of these and go in and make changes if we wish. So you can either do it through your effect controls or through the timeline. It just depends on how you want to approach it. So that is a little bit about effects in After Effects. We'll be getting into more advanced effects and techniques as we continue on. One tip I wanted to point out is the ability to copy effects from one clip to another, or you can copy an effect and paste it onto the same clip to create two of the same effect if you wish. And it's really easy to do. So first, we have our clip here in our Lesson 4 project file. And I'll come over here and place a new effect. So let's come down here. I'll go to Stylize again. And I will choose, let's say, brush strokes. Put that in. So now, you come in here and let's say you make some alterations to this. Just whatever you want. It's something that you really, really like. It's the best thing ever. And in this case, I'm just sort of randomly placing values in here, but let's just say this is something that you really want to work with and you want to use throughout a project. Well, all you have to do is with the effect highlighted, go up to Edit and Copy. Or you can simply use Command-C if you're on Mac or Control-C if you're on Windows. Now, let's bring up a second piece of footage here. So we have a second piece of footage on the timeline. It looks like this. All you have to do is click on that footage and then paste with Command-V, or you can go up to Edit and Paste, and you can see now that effect has been applied to the second clip. So again, it's a really simple tip, but I figured I should mention it because it can be very useful, especially if you're working with multiple pieces of footage and you want the same effects to be applied throughout. When using After Effects, you're not just stuck with the built-in presets that come with the program. Now, these are great and they can provide a wide range of uses. However, there may come a point where you find an effect online or you decide to create your own effect and you want to integrate it into After Effects. Luckily, this process is pretty simple. First, you'll need to locate an effect that you want to install. Now, there's several websites out there that give these plugins away for free, or you can pay for them and download them to your computer. I suggest starting with the official third-party plugin page for After Effects, which is located right here. As you can see, it gives you a list of the most popular developers, and we could scroll down here, click on one, and you can view the effect that they're currently offering. So you can browse the internet and find a plugin that you want to use. Once you find a plugin and you download it, what you'll want to do is bring up your file browser. In this case, I'm using Finder since I'm on a Mac. You'll be using Windows Explorer if you're on Windows. And what you're going to want to do is locate your applications or your programs if you're on Windows. So I'll go over here to Applications, and I want to locate After Effects in my applications, which is right here. And I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to scroll down until I find plugins. From here, you can see we have different plugins. We have effects, extensions, and so forth. So I could take that plugin and stick it in right into this folder. So now, once I reopen After Effects, it will browse the folder and see if there's anything new. If it finds something new, it will integrate it, and you'll see it in the effects panel in After Effects. So it's a pretty simple process, and there are different effects that will work differently. Make sure you read the instructions for each effect that you plan to install, because some of them may have some different instructions. You never know. There are advanced effects out there that require a little bit more when it comes to installing. But as a rule, this is the way you'll go when it comes to installing third-party effects in After Effects. In After Effects, you have several different built-in default effects that you can pick and choose from. And many of these work differently when it comes to the effect controls. So in this video, I'm just going to go through and pick out some different effects and show you how you can alter them in various ways. So first, let's take a look at the Effects and Presets panel. I'm just going to come down here, and let's pick out first the Blur and Sharpen. Now, Blur and Sharpen is important because here you can choose many different types of blur effects. You can see we have a few already right on screen, and as we go down, it keeps going. All sorts of different blurs. And then we have a couple of sharpen effects in here as well. But basically, each of these blurs does something different. If I go up here, let's go ahead and choose a radial blur. So I'll just click and drag it right into the clip. And you can see now there's definitely a new effect taking place here. Let me just come down here and I will boost our magnification. You can see everything is kind of blurring from the center or from wherever your anchor point is. So you can come in here and you can adjust the amount of blur that you want to apply to the clip. And you can see we even have a diagram here. We can come in here and we can adjust the blur this way as well. So the radial blur works differently compared to, let's say, a camera blur. So let me go ahead and I'll just downsize this, come over here, and let's choose that camera blur right here. Just bring it in. You can see now, while we can create a new blur effect, I'll just hide this effect that we had currently on screen. There are definitely different settings you can pick compared to the radial blur. I can come down here and I can even adjust the highlights of the blur, going like that. Or I can come in here and just adjust the blur radius. I can even, if I want, repeat the edge pixels. You can see right now that the pixels are sort of fading off. If I click this, it sort of fixes that. So there's many different options here when it comes to blur effects. And you're going to find out if you add more. Let's just try this one. It's going to be the same thing. You can see here we have a new set of properties when it comes to adjusting this effect. So it would be almost impossible to do a tutorial on all of these effects. It would take several hours because there's so many different properties, it would be very hard to detail them all. It's really going to come down to you playing around with this stuff and getting a good grasp on how everything works, and then becoming familiar with plugins that will work best for you. So let's go ahead here and just remove all of these effects. I'm just going to delete. You can also, if you want, go up to Effect and remove all, or Shift Command E or Shift Control E if you're on Windows. And you can see that will remove all the effects that you currently have on the clip. Let's come back over here, bring this up. There's also Generate Effects. Let me just click on this. You can see we have a 4-color gradient, advanced lighting, and it just kind of keeps going on like that. So let's just pick the 4-color gradient. Bring that on. You can see now we have a new gradient, and it has 4 different colors. So it's pretty self-explanatory. So right up here, you can pick and choose the colors as well as where the colors appear with their points. So that's pretty interesting. And you can choose a blend mode right here. So we could bring this up and we could try to blend the colors as much as we want to, just like that. We can also choose the opacity. So we can come down here and we can lower the opacity or raise it. There's also blending modes here, which will work if you're trying to blend with your video. So again, different properties for different effects. Let's come up here and hit delete. And I will choose one more category here. Let me scroll down. Perspective. So let's go ahead and click on that. And let's choose bevel edges. You can see that this creates a bevel effect, and we can of course increase the thickness, or we can adjust the way the light angle works, the light color, intensity, and so on and so forth. And if you decide to download other effects and install them into your After Effects, you're going to find out that all of those have their own options as well. So really, it all comes down to doing some research, reading up on it, and of course, playing around with these effects on your own time to see what effects you can come up with for your own projects. Adjustment layers can be a great help when applying effects in After Effects. As an example, let's say you have 20 different assets that you're working on that are all in the timeline, and you want to apply an effect to them. Let's say you want to apply some color correction. You want to add a glow, a blur, whatever it is. Well, you could go through each asset and apply the effect to them and adjust the parameters, or you could copy and paste the effect onto all of those assets, or you could use an adjustment layer. Because with an adjustment layer, any asset that's underneath it on the timeline will be affected by whatever you apply to that adjustment layer. And there's other perks to this as well. So let's take a look at this and see it in action, and I'm sure it will make more sense to you. I have my Lesson 4 project file open, and I'm simply going to go up to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer. So now we have a new adjustment layer in the timeline, and like any other layer, you could come down here and right-click and choose Rename. Now you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but it's always best to be as organized as possible, so I'll just name this Filters. That way I know what I'm doing with that layer, and I can hit Enter. Now let's jump over to the Effects and Presets panel. I'm just going to come over here, and I will choose Color Correction for this. And let's pick out Brightness and Contrast. Now, when I drag this over, I'm not going to put it onto the baby clip. I'm going to bring it over to the adjustment layer. So I'll click and drag and put it right onto that layer, just like this. So now we are in the adjustment layer controls. So right up here, I can come in and adjust the brightness and contrast. Now notice as I do this, you can see I'm increasing the brightness and it's affecting the clip. I can also increase the contrast. Now, I would probably never go this high with this stuff, but this is just for demonstration purposes so you can see what's going on. So now I have applied that effect. You can see if I come down here, if I hide the adjustment layer, it removes the effect. And I can bring it back by simply clicking that icon again. Now, as I was describing, you can affect multiple assets at once. Let's go ahead and lock this layer so we don't accidentally move it. And I'll click on the baby and just move him down like so. Now I'm going to bring in a second asset. So I'll come back here to my project panel, and I'm simply going to bring that clip back in. So I'm going to make a second copy of the baby. I'll just click and drag and move it down and release. You can see now it appears that both clips have that filter applied. However, if I were to come up here to the adjustment layer, click, let's make sure it's unlocked, and drag it down in between the two clips and release, you can see now the bottom clip, the clip that's actually above the filters on the timeline, is not being affected. So you can really pick and choose what's being affected by your adjustment layers. And in fact, you can stack adjustment layers. So you could have several different adjustment layers doing different things. And since they're stacked and one affects the other, you could come up with some pretty interesting results if you wanted to go that route. Let me just put this clip back to where it was. And in fact, I might just go ahead and remove it so we can focus in on just one clip. Now, the final thing I want to touch on is the ability to decrease the opacity of an adjustment layer. Now, you can do this for any asset you wish, but it makes the most sense with adjustment layers just because you can adjust the intensity of the effects you have on that layer. So if we come over here to the timeline, let's click on the arrow next to filters and let's go to transform. Right down here, you'll see opacity. Now, if your screen looks like mine and you see no numbers on the right of opacity, come down here and click on this icon. This will expand things out more and you'll see now what I'm seeing on screen. We can then lower the opacity. So I'm just going to click and drag and go down like this a little bit. So you can see as I adjust the opacity, we are adjusting the intensity of the effects. So I could go like right about there as an example. And so this allows you to place effects on and then adjust them after the fact, should you want to. Now, if you're doing really detailed work, this might not be enough to offset something that's really extreme, but it can help in certain editing situations. So to conclude, adjustment layers are a big part of After Effects, and as you start to work more with the software, I think you'll start to use them more and more as projects become more complicated. In After Effects, we have the ability to alter the time of a clip. As an example, let's say you're working on an action sequence and you want to create a slow motion part to emphasize something cool that's going on. Or maybe you want to speed something up. Either way, you can adjust the time very easily with just a few clicks of the button. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can adjust the time, and then we'll look at how to blend frames together. Now, I don't have something as exciting as an action sequence for you guys. However, if we page through this, you can see there is a lot of movement occurring. So this should be a good example for us when it comes to looking at the speed changes of the clip. So first, you'll want to right-click on the clip in the timeline that you want to alter. In this case, we only have one, so I'm going to right-click on it and then come down here to Time and choose Time Stretch. Now, a new dialog box will appear. At first, you see the original duration, which is about 20 seconds. If we go down here, we can adjust the stretch factor. Now, this works a little bit differently compared to, let's say, Premiere, because if you come up here and you enter in 200, you're actually doubling the duration of the clip, or in other words, you're slowing it down. Now, in Premiere, if you were to do this, you would actually be speeding the clip up. You'd want to put in 50% in Premiere to slow it down. So just keep that in mind as you work with this because it can be a little bit confusing at first. I know when I first saw this, I was like, wait a minute, shouldn't it be reversed? But After Effects works with a different set of rules. So in this case, we will go with 200% since that will make the clip twice as slow. So we should be good here and we can click OK. So now, if I were to play this out, and I may have to use RAM Preview for this, so let me go ahead and do that. You can see now, when we play it back, it looks slower. And that's what we wanted. However, you can see what's happening here. If I come over here to my time controls, I'm just going to go to next frame, and you can use page up for this if you want on your keyboard. You can see as I page up, I went 2 frames and it was the same. Now watch again. I'm going to page up 1. It's the same frame. I page up again. We go to the next frame. So basically, in this case, it's just duplicating the frames each time to create that slow motion. So it looks a little bit choppy in some regard. However, we can use frame blending to correct this if we want. So beside our clip, we have a few different buttons right down here, and we want to focus in on frame blending, which is right here. Now, if you don't see this stuff, remember, you can click this button right down here to bring it up. So just click that to bring it up, click it again to bring it off. But we'll just go like that, and we're simply going to click the checkbox here to turn on frame blending. Now, in addition to this, you also have to check on frame blending for the composition. Make sure you do this or it won't work. It's right up here. Just go ahead and click this, so now you're good to go. So let's do a preview here again. I'm just going to back up and we'll click this, let it render out. Just takes a few seconds for this one. Okay, we're good to go. Now you can kind of see there's sort of a trailing effect occurring here. Let me just pause this and I'll come back here, and as we go to the next frame, you can see right there. Let me just zoom in. You can see there's a blending effect occurring. This is what frame blending does. Basically, it's taking the two frames and it's blending it. So you're not just doubling up on the frames, it's trying to interpolate what's going on. So if I come over here, you can see there's our original frame, then it interpolates, there's the next, interpolates, and so on. Now, in some cases, this might work, but in other cases, it might be a little bit too distracting depending on what you're going for here. So let's go ahead and pause that. Now, if we come back here to frame blending, we can click on this button again, and this is going to enable another mode of blending. So let me come back here, and I'm going to hit RAM Preview so that we can preview this out correctly. Again, it just takes a few seconds, and you'll probably get used to seeing this quite a bit as you are previewing because it can sometimes take a while. So you can see here, it looks a little bit different. And what's going on here? Well, let's pause it. Now, if we go in advanced frames, you can see it's doing something a little bit different. It's actually trying to calculate what's going to happen next, and it's drawing those frames in. So you're not getting just like a transparency overlay effect. You're actually getting a warping effect of sorts. Now, the problem with this in some cases, and you can kind of see it in the shirt here, is that it does warp things and it tends to make things look a little bit wonky. You'll see kind of a warp effect. That's the only way I can really describe it in some cases. Like right there with the ear, you can see it's kind of a little bit destabilized. So you'll get that situation sometimes when you use this mode. However, again, depending on what you're doing, you may find that it works good in your situation. So that's how you can adjust the time of your clips in After Effects. In addition to creating time differences with your clips, you can also create reverse motion and still frames. And it's all pretty easy to do. In fact, it's very similar to creating the time change that you did in the previous video. So first, you'll need a clip on your timeline. Now I have the Lesson 4 project file opened up once again, and we can come down here to that clip. We are going to right-click, choose Time, and you can see right here we have Freeze Frame and we have Time Reverse Layer. So first, let's choose Time Reversed Layer. Once we do this, if we hit play, you can see now that we have reversed the time of the layer. It's going backwards. So I can just play this out, and well, let me create a RAM preview really quick. And that's probably going to take a little bit of time, but you can clearly tell that it is in reverse compared to where it was before. So I'll go ahead and stop that. I can just play that small section out so we can see it. Anyway, you can very easily reverse the speed of your clips with a few clicks of the button. Now, let me go back here. I'm just going to right click and I'm going to choose that option again to bring it back by default to where it was. So we're not going to be going in reverse anymore. And I'm going to right click again, come down here to time and choose freeze frame. So now what this does, you can see here that it freezes where we had the playhead. So you can see the markers right there, and this whole clip is now frozen. So if you ever want to apply a freeze frame to your project, that's how you would do it. And both of these functions can be very useful. They have specific purposes, of course, but you never know. There might come a point where you need to reverse your footage or create a still frame in After Effects. Blending modes in After Effects can really enhance your project. As an example, let's say you have one layer overlaid over another. Instead of just having that one layer stick out at the top, you can apply a blending mode to blend the two layers together in a variety of different ways. The same applies for some effects. You can take those effects and blend them, again, to create a more natural look for your footage. As an example, I have the Lesson 4 project file up, and I'm going to go over here to my effects and presets. And once again here, I'm going to go to generate and choose the 4-color gradient. I picked this one in a previous video and I briefly touched on the blending modes, but I thought this would be a good opportunity to go back and touch on it a little bit more so you have a better understanding of it. So I'm just going to click and drag that onto my clip. Now, by default, if you come down here, we can see blending mode, and it's set to none. And that's why right now we just have a solid gradient color. It's not affecting the video in any way. It's just overlaying colors over the video. Even if we bring the opacity down on this effect, it's still just creating a solid color. It's not putting anything underneath. So let's bring that up back to 100%, and let's click on blending modes. Now, as you can see, we have a wide range of effects here that we can choose from. Now, each of these are going to interact with your footage in a different way. As an example, we could choose color burn to create a burn effect. Let's just come down here and give that a shot. You can see it appears that the colors are being burned into the footage. Now, in some cases, this could be cool. Maybe you're overlaying fire on the ground and you want to create a scorched looking ground as the fire is going. Well, burn could be perfect for this. Additionally, let's go ahead and choose screen right down here. You can see this creates kind of an opposite effect. Basically, it really lightens things up and you have just a hint of the baby in shot. But with the right assets, this can really add some pop to your footage. And again, there's just many others to choose from. Multiply will do this. And again, it kind of does a blending that's more, I would say, neutral. Come back here. We could choose hard light. You can see it does that type of effect. And you can go through and just choose many different types that will alter your footage in a variety of ways. And again, this just doesn't apply to effects. You can do this with layers and other aspects of After Effects. If you're looking for a reference guide to what each blend mode does, you can always Google it. Just type in After Effects blending modes. The best way, though, is just to play around with this and see what results you can come up with. You never know when a blending mode will surprise you, and it will fit in perfectly with what you're working on at that moment.